I like to think that there's a lot more to me than just being a basketball coach. I grew up in Rosse, a small town in west central Minnesota, on a cattle and crop farm. I'm the oldest of 7 kids. I have 4 sisters, 2 brothers. We joke that, because my whole family is from Rosse, that my mom actually had to pick up my dad on their first date back in high school because he didn't have his license yet. I think my work ethic comes from watching my dad and my grandpa work on the farm every single day. Early mornings, late nights, whatever it took in order to provide for our families, they were willing to do it. And so I picked up on the importance of hard work at an early age. When I was going into 3rd grade, my dad accepted the junior varsity coaching position in Rosse. And so at about 8 years old, I was incredibly excited to be his manager. I look back now, it was probably really comical to everybody at the games watching how passionately I wiped up the spilled water on the floor or swept the floor before practice. It was my goal to make sure that there was not a single ounce or drop of water on the floor coming out of a timeout, and I had that passion starting in 3rd grade. I remember being at Concordia College in Moorhead after the team lost a playoff game and the season was done, and I was in 3rd grade. I might have been the only person crying in the locker room. And so that passion for the game of basketball started as early as I can remember. Had the opportunity once I got to Northwestern to play there, was playing in open gyms, and I was doing fine. But I was losing my passion for playing, and it was weird because it was the first time that had ever happened in my life. I had a really cool experience sitting in my dorm room. Kind of had decided I wasn't going to play, and I hadn't seen or talked to anybody, so nobody knew. And Nate Thompson, who was my high school teammate who was playing at Northwestern, came in and said, "Hey, I just talked to Coach Groves. He wants to talk to you in the morning." And so thought, oh, okay, this might be interesting. And I went in there with full intention of telling him that I probably wasn't going to play, wasn't going to come out. And he cut me off and said, "Hey, I talked to your head high school coach, Greg Preston, who's still to this day a mentor of mine. And he said, Coach Preston told me there's a kid down at Northwestern that should be coaching. He probably just doesn't know it yet. And so we've never had a student assistant position before, but we'd like to give it a shot." And that's how my college coaching career began. I spent 2 years at Northwestern and was really hungry to learn. I was a sponge, but I wanted more responsibility. And so I had the opportunity to jump over to Bethel University. I was a kid that was willing to work 80 to 100 hours a week for free. I just wanted to learn. I had my own office. It was actually 207B was the office, and the guys joked consistently, they called it 207 Reid because I was always in there. Didn't matter what time it was. It wasn't rare for me to show up to an 8 a.m. class in a suit. People would say, "Hey, why the heck are you in a suit?" I said, "Well, we had a game last night. I haven't gone home because we had an issue with the film or something." So sleeping in the office wasn't uncommon. After I finished up at Bethel, I had the opportunity to go down and be the top assistant at Waldorf College in Iowa. And that brought on a bunch of new challenges. And I remember, one week driving about 6 hours to Green Bay on a Tuesday, back at 3 in the morning, getting up the next day in the office at 8. On that Wednesday, going to Norfolk, Nebraska. The next day, going 6 hours in the other direction, get back at 2, 3 in the morning, shower up, pack my bags for the weekend, go pack the jerseys, and I'd sleep in the office for a couple hours and get on the bus at 7 a.m. to drive to Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and then to Conway, Arkansas. Getting home Sunday morning after we've driven through the night, and the bus breaks down 15 minutes from Forest City. So just long weeks getting after, but it was incredibly valuable. I learned a lot of things about myself, about work ethic, and about the details of the game, which eventually allowed me to jump to Minnesota State Moorhead, Division II program on the rise. Chad Walthall had been there a couple years after being the associate head coach at the University of Iowa. And so he was highly regarded as one of the best coaches in the Northern Sun. And the year that I was there, I had the opportunity to be a part of a conference championship team that I believe was the first team in 32 years to bring a conference championship to Moorhead. After that year at Moorhead finished up, I was engaged. My now wife, Amanda, had just moved from Virginia to New York City, where she worked in talent and casting for the biggest reality TV company in North America. And in the process of trying to figure out what I was going to do as I applied for other jobs, I began working at a gym on Long Island. training basketball players. And that was right around the time that I met DJ Sackman. And I firmly believe DJ Sackman to be one of the best trainers in the world, if not the best. He had just moved back from Los Angeles, and I ended up moving to New Jersey to open up the hoop school. So I became the program director there and did some cool things. Had the opportunity to go with DJ to Atlanta and work with Damari Carroll, who had just signed a $60 million contract with the Toronto Raptors. And in that time, I was getting calls from professional players in Minnesota about working out. So driving back and forth or flying back and forth from between New Jersey and Minnesota, running camps, and business was booming. I was incredibly excited about the opportunity to transition to full-time training as I had stepped aside from the college coaching route. Right around the time that I moved to New York, my family picked up and moved right outside Columbus, Ohio. My mom and dad had felt called to do some missions work in the inner city and working with people and coming out of rehab and different things like that, being able to present the gospel that way. And so I had the opportunity through one of my clients in New Jersey to go run a camp a couple hours away from where my parents lived in Ohio. So in early July of 2016, I went and spent a week at my parents' house with my siblings, had the opportunity to run the camp, and had conversations with my mom and dad about how they were going to come to New York and New Jersey and visit in the fall, and it was a really exciting time. And then actually at the end of the week, we drove to Pennsylvania, where my wife's family and my family were going to have kind of a family vacation for a week that we were really excited about. I looked at my parents' bed, and it hadn't been touched. That's how I knew something was wrong. A couple days into the vacation, my mom didn't feel very well, and so she was pretty tough, never complained about anything. And so my dad said, "Hey, we're just gonna go get her some medicine. Can you put the kids to bed?" I said, "Yeah, we'll take care of it." And woke up in the morning and went to go get breakfast. And I thought, well, hey, I'll go next door and make sure that my family hasn't gone to breakfast yet. And I walked over there and I opened the door, and it was quiet. And I remember walking in, and I saw my brothers on an air mattress on the floor. Sela was sleeping on the floor, and Livy was in the bed. I looked at my parents' bed, and it hadn't been touched. It was perfectly made from the night before. That's how I knew something was wrong. I went outside to call my dad, get some cell reception, and typically when you call my dad, for some reason it always rings like 14 or 15 times, and then he answers. And I think it rang once, and he answered with, "I've been trying to call you all night." I don't remember much of the conversation. I remember exactly where I was standing. It was foggy, the ground was wet, my socks got wet. I remember exactly where I was. My wife's aunt, who's a nurse, had the opportunity to talk to one of my mom's doctors, and she sat me, my dad, and my wife down, and she was going to kind of give us a diagnosis. And she said something like, "I'm going to put my nurse face on and give it to you straight, and then I'm going to go to my room and I'm going to cry because it's really bad." And so she talked for a while and gave us some of the details, and I have no idea what she said. I finally got up and I walked out in the middle of it. I don't think I've ever done anything like that before, and I just started walking and ended up in the middle of a soccer field, about a half a mile away it felt like, and I turned around and my wife was there, and I realized that I had my little brother's little mini football in my hands, and I think I kicked it about 100 yards. I walked back into the room where my dad was, and you can picture two hotel beds with a space in between them, and my dad was sitting on the floor. And he had been so strong for my mom, my siblings, and for me. But in that moment, I saw my dad like I had never seen him before. And I don't think we needed words to explain what we had just realized it wasn't if my mom was gonna die, it was when was she gonna die. 4.5 weeks later, my dad called on a Saturday night and said, your mom's body's shutting down, you need to get here. And so my wife and I drove through the night, stopped halfway and got there Sunday morning. And for 2 weeks straight, I had convinced myself that, like coaching, I could just work out my problems. I was convinced that if I stayed up all night, that could solve something. So I stayed up until 4:30 in the morning. I'd get up at 7 or 7:30, and I did that for 2 straight weeks. And I think I convinced myself that the longer I was awake, the longer the day was gonna feel. The longer the days felt, the longer my mom was gonna be alive. My mom died on a Sunday morning, August 28th, 2016. The next year was incredibly chaotic. Prior to my mom getting sick, my wife and I had discussed the potential of moving to Minnesota. My business was growing in a positive direction. Was really excited about the opportunity, and about a month or so after my mom died, my wife and I decided together that was going to be the best decision for us as a family. And so by December 28th, 2016, we were officially moved into our new place in Eden Prairie. Moving home was good. I have friends here that I consider family. 2 of them, my best friends, were actually with me when my mom died in Ohio. It was good. It was good to move back, but I was in a rut. I felt like anything positive that happened brought on a range of emotions. I was grieving, and grief is difficult. It's confusing, it's hard, and I was smack dab in the middle of it. I remember one night working out at the University of Minnesota practice facility late. I was working with some of their top players. Point guard was on the Naismith watch list preseason, and a highly touted recruit coming in. And I got in my car afterwards. I couldn't believe that I had the opportunity to work them out at their facility, that they had reached out to me. And I got in my car, I was so excited, and I grabbed my phone and I went to call my mom. And I realized that she was never gonna answer. I think I sat in the parking lot for close to an hour that night. And I probably called her phone 45 times as I cried. Hi, this is Karen. Go ahead and leave a message. I've probably listened to her voicemail 1,000 times in the past 2 years. When my mom died, Brad Bigler, the head coach at Southwest Minnesota State, called me, and he was incredibly blunt. He just said, Reid, you need to be about the things that your mom was about, and that's how you carry on her legacy. Don't just talk about your mom, be about your mom. Be about the things that she was about. That's something that I've tried to carry on in my life over the course of these past 2 years. At my mom's funeral, my dad referenced a book titled The Ways of the Alongsider. And I think that perfectly describes my mom. Someone willing to just walk alongside people, go through life, through their journey with them. And it didn't matter what that looked like. That's something that I want to be about with my players. Basketball has given me the opportunity to impact players from all over. And I've been fortunate enough to work with some of the top players in the world, but just because they're a professional athlete doesn't mean that they don't have struggles. I have a pro player that lost his mom just over a year ago. I have a youth player whose dad passed away 6 years ago. I've worked with a player that struggled with addiction. We all have our journey, and it looks different. And my struggles might look different than your struggles, but they're struggles, and we gotta walk through them. But if I can help players get better on the floor and also help them maneuver life off the court, then that's a win in my book. That's my story, for now anyway. I try to take things day by day, and we'll see what happens over the course of the next few years, but I'm excited for whatever comes.